One of the components that is most important to me in my work deals with what I refer to as the physicality of the paint. The act of mark making, the choice of a palette, the choice of tools to make the work, the size, the scale of the work, all those things are interesting to me in regard to the decisions that come into play. But the physical presence of the sheer material, the substance of paint, is part of, for me, part of the romance of the studio. I'm working almost exclusively in oil paint. So to be working with that very old material, those substances, and the kinds of mediums that go along with that, whether turpentine and linseed oil and sand oil and an array of other materials, the aroma, the smells of the studio, from the physical accoutrement that goes along with that is, again, part of the mystique of the process of painting for me. I've lived in the southern United States the majority of my life, and I've been in Louisiana for over 30 years, so that continues to have an interesting, sometimes surprising influence on the work. I think most noticeably, even though when you look at my work, one does not think of it as, in any conventional sense, as related to the landscape, but the environment is definitely a part of the work, whether it has to do with heat or the influence of water or rain. Thinking about water as a catalyst, whether it's something as simple as, for example, the pond that's between our studio and home, or juxtaposed with something that was far more monumental, for example, Hurricane Katrina, and the extraordinary impact that had on the Gulf Coast. The idea of influence is very interesting. For me, because it's a resource that I very often use, that is to say, I'm very conscious that I have been looking at, for example, Rembrandt's Bather, and that I'm interested in somehow responding to the idea of light or water or the idea of bathing. So what is it that I take from that painting? What do I extract? How is that information filtered through my own poetic sensibilities? And then ultimately, what sort of visual poem do I make, or that it is important to make at this particular point in time? Some of the work in recent years has evolved out of series. This is not necessarily a conscious decision on the front end. It's generally a more intuitive decision in terms of how one painting moves into another, and the ways in which one can resolve one formal issue and another emerges, so that you begin to realize this is one solution to building a painting, but there is another way to do this, or I need to investigate another alternative. There are plenty of times where I will simply make one work in response to an experience, a literary reference, an observation, perhaps an object serves as a catalyst for a single painting, and then I will continue and move in different directions. The use of text, the written word, in my work has emerged off and on for a variety of years. Two bodies of work that I've recently taken on. One is the Baudelaire sketches in reference to the French poet Charles Baudelaire, and the other is called the Cardinalis sketches, which really, using the root word of cardinal, which of course has multiple associations, whether we think of theology or the bird or a very wide range of associations. I'm interested in the multidisciplinary nature of language and how that begins to open up possibilities in making a painting. When I look around the studio now at a number of these paintings that are in here, I think the layperson would approach these and think of them as very improvisational works, very gestural kinds of paintings, and that is true in part. But there's also an interesting process where there is a balance that I need to strike, or I find myself choosing to strike between intuition and deliberation. And I think the deliberation component emerges when I'm very much aware of a specific resource. In the right circumstances, the right place and time, there's a juxtaposition or some kind of correspondence that makes sense, that allows you to use that. And that's something that I take a great deal of pleasure in, simply being still and being quiet and being open to the possibility of these influences and the way in which they begin to merge and coalesce and come together.